years, Classic Game Vault has been able to amass a collection of awesome gaming hardware beyond my wildest dreams. But the question remains, where should Classic Game Vault go next?
That's right, Classic Game Vault is now in possession of a shiny new Xbox 360 arcade. Now you might be wondering, what does the Xbox 360 have to do with a classic game review show? Well, to play those classic arcade games in shiny HD graphics. Games such as, Pacman or Ms. Pacman. But on the other hand, what if you want to play Pacman or Ms. Pacman on a more vintage machine? You could try this, but not quite vintage enough. What about this? No, that's not really vintage enough either. What about that? Yeah, that's the ticket. In fact, the only way to play all three Pac-Man games on a home console is Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, and Junior Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. Because Junior Pac-Man was never released for any other home console than the 2600. So how do these classic games stack up against their arcade originals? Well, let's take a look.
Well, the label says that this is Pac-Man for the Atari 2600, but calling this Pac-Man is pretty much similar to calling a turd a bonbon. In fact, that's not even quite accurate either, because a turd sort of actually resembles a bonbon. This does not resemble the arcade classic Pac-Man in any way. While there is a guy eating things on screen, and there are ghosts, Pac-Man doesn't look like Pac-Man. He doesn't rotate around corners like the arcade Pac-Man did. And in this capture, you only see two ghosts. That's because the programming was so bad that the Atari hardware couldn't display all four ghosts at once. So it had to display each one at a time, and then make it disappear and show the next one, and it would do this so rapidly as to give you the appearance of having four ghosts on the screen at once. Now the reason you can only see two ghosts is because this is a 30 frames per second capture, and obviously the game played at 60 frames per second. This is not the classic Pac-Man that we all know and love. With Ms. Pac-Man for the Atari 2600, things do get just a little bit more promising. You get all four ghosts at once, and the mazes actually do resemble the mazes that you found in the original arcade game. The sounds don't really mimic the arcade game much, but they're not too bad considering what the 2600 had for audio hardware. All in all, this is a pretty good port, probably the best that you're going to get using the Atari 2600 hardware. The only thing missing are the intermission sequences, but after a while of playing Ms. Pac-Man over and over again, you tend to get tired of those intermission sequences anyhow. Overall, this is a pretty good translation of Ms. Pac-Man for the Atari 2600, and is definitely worth picking up if you have a 2600. Of course, if you have an Atari 7800, there's the infinitely much better and much more faithful Atari 7800 port of Ms. Pac-Man by Atari, but we're going to take a look at that some other time. With Junior Pac-Man for the Atari 2600, things begin to get just a little bit strange. The main reason for that is while the graphics are quite good and on par with Ms. Pac-Man, in the arcade original, the mazes scroll horizontally, but for some reason on the 2600, they scroll vertically and don't really resemble the mazes from the arcade original. Other than that, though, the graphics are quite good. The gameplay is really fast, much faster than you might be used to with Pac-Man or Ms. Pac-Man. And on the 2600, it is a very fun game to play if you can get used to the fast pace. Although the one thing I can't figure out is in this first maze of Junior Pac-Man, why is it so bloody dark? This isn't an error with my capture equipment. This is really what it looks like on a television. It's dark, and you actually have to turn your brightness controls up so you can see where the hell you're going. I don't know why they came up with this brown color. Junior Pac-Man in the arcades doesn't even use this color at all. It has nice, bright, vibrant colors. So, for whatever reason, this is what Atari gave us, and this is, up until very recently, the only way to play Junior Pac-Man on a home console. There was a planned port for the Atari 5200, but at the time, I believe Namco was pulling its license away from Midway to release Pac-Man games in North America, which, by virtue of that, Atari lost its license to publish Pac-Man games, so it was never made for the Atari 5200, and Junior Pac-Man remains a poor little orphan. So if you want to play more realistic versions of these games on a classic game system, what is a guy to do? Well, thankfully, the folks at AtariAge.com have an answer for you.
While Atari did give us an excellent port of Ms. Pac-Man for the Atari 7800, what about her husband and son, Pac-Man and Junior Pac-Man? Well, thanks to the folks at AtariAge.com, we now have brand new versions of Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man in Pac-Man Collection. These are basically sprite-hacked versions taken from the original Ms. Pac-Man ROM of the game, with Ms. Pac-Man being tweaked a little bit for more accurate colors to better match the arcade original. What is also available is a brand new programmed from the ground up port of Junior Pac-Man for the Atari 7800. This is done from the ground up, it's brand new, and that's why it's not included with Pac-Man Collection, as well as the fact that it could not fit with the other two games on a single Atari 7800 cartridge. And when you order these from AtariAge.com, you get nice packaging. They come shrink wrapped. They're brand new cartridges, and you also get nice full color manuals to go with them. Now this is better than how Atari treated the 7800, because as you remember, Atari 7800 games came with cheesy black and white packaging. So how do these brand new ports stack up to the arcade originals? Let's find out.
The first thing you'll notice when you boot up Pac-Man Collection on your Atari 7800 is all of the different options that you get. You can choose to play either Pac-Man or Ms. Pac-Man, as well as some other options that are variations of the gameplay that were actually introduced by Namco in the original Pac-Man arcade. And they have been faithfully represented here. In fact, the game itself has been faithfully represented here. The graphics and sounds are spot on, which is pretty amazing considering how limited the Atari 7800 sound hardware was. This port of Pac-Man on the Atari 7800 is an absolute joy to play, and is probably the best Pac-Man game you can play for any classic console. Now the version of Ms. Pac-Man included in Pac-Man Collection is basically just a port of the ROM that Atari made for the 7800, except that the colors have been modified just a little bit to more accurately represent the arcade original. Since it was an excellent game to begin with, not much work was required to make this as good as it is. However, it's still great that it's included in the package, and it allows you to play Ms. Pac-Man and Pac-Man from one cartridge on your Atari 7800. There really isn't much else to say. This is such an excellent port. All of the intermissions are included, and the graphics and sounds are the best that you will find on the Atari 7800. This is the coup de grace of homebrew for the Atari 7800. Junior Pac-Man. Finally, a Junior Pac-Man that actually resembles the arcade original, complete with the title screen, intermissions, everything. Graphics, sounds, it's all perfect. And that's why it could not be included with Pac-Man Collection, because this project was far too ambitious to be stuffed into an Atari 7800 cartridge, along with Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man. As you can see, the mazes in this game are exactly as the arcade original. The gameplay speed is cranked right up, just like the arcade original was. And this game is an absolute ball to play on the Atari 7800. I could talk about it more, but I'd rather just sit here and watch.